chance. Let's see what we're up to today. Who knows, we might have some fun.
Welcome to the sixth part of the life of Tom Ploy. And in this video we are covering years 35 to 42, and in this one we are just 3 days into this 7-year period in his life. And things take a turn for the worse.
I definitely don't like the sound of that.
Very wise. So we find him where most of these events seem to happen.
At work.
Yes, he was working at his accountant's and finished the inside part, and instead of going home early...
Yes, I bet he wished he'd been more lazy that day.
Indeed, but unfortunately he decided to start the exterior part of the job but didn't have his ladders with him.
Don't like the way this is going.
He informed the customer that he had to go and get a ladder, and she said they had one if he wanted to borrow it.
What could possibly go wrong?
So he thought he would do some preparation and was working on the guttering, when all of a sudden he thought, where did that window come from? And everything goes black. And it was only when he regained consciousness that he realised he had fallen off the ladder.
He fell off the ladder.
Well, if you're being pedantic, he was still on the ladder when it hit the ground.
Better.
Not really, and by any definition, it really was a life-changing accident.
And not in a good way.
Definitely. He finally managed to get someone's attention and they took him to hospital.
What happened when he was taken to hospitals?
The normal events and an x-ray that showed that he'd broken 3 metatarsal bones in his left foot.
You say broke, but in fact it snapped the heads off the bones, and don't forget the concussion. And he thought it was painful.
He certainly did, but it was nothing compared to when it was put in a back cast.
And this is where he meets that 1% of nurses that you'd prefer not to meet. What did she do?
She just grabbed his foot, placed it in line with her chest and leant forward against the brakes. And when he yelped in pain, she just coldly looked at him and said, "Don't make a fuss, as it's bound to hurt a bit."
Wouldn't want to meet her again.
Nor did he. But fate had other ideas, as the next day he had to go back to have a full cast replacing the temporary back cast. And who was there?
Nurse Ratchid.
Yeah, and she had that smile you only see when someone is enjoying others' suffering.
Schadenfreude.
That's easy for you to say, but worse news was to come after the cast was removed. It was obvious something still wasn't right, as his foot was still 3 times its size. And cherry pink, hot to the touch. Not that you could touch without it being extremely painful, and he was unable to flex the toes and couldn't wear any type of shoes and still need to use crutches.
So what did they do?
It started by him going through a lot of physiotherapy.
Didn't go well.
For him, no. But you have to give the chap who looked after him 5 days a week over the next 6 months a lot of credit, as he tried his hardest to improve things, as he tried everything he could think of.
And the only thing not tried was acupuncture.
Even after those 6 months of intensive physio, the only improvement Tom had was being able to bear weight on the heel of that foot.
And even today he's unable to bear any weight through the front part of his foot. And wearing a shoe, albeit an oversized one, was years away. Bugger.
Yes, bugger indeed. The first footwear he was able to use was an old pair of trainers which had the front upper part from the tongue forward removed.
So as long as he doesn't try and bear weight on it, it was okay?
Not really. Even wearing socks was an unpleasant experience. There was also, and he still has, involuntary twitching and a sudden shooting, sharp piercing pain, and can best be described as feeling like a large knitting needle forced between the toes through the foot right into the heel, and the slightest knock to the foot felt like a hammer blow.
The only enjoyment he had at this time was playing video games like Sonic, as the only way he could cope with this constant pain was finding a distraction. And that still remains the best way to keep his mind occupied. That might go some way to explain why he flies like he does.
In the next couple of years at the local hospital, many appointments were made where they tried multiple things. And up the chain he went, and he was desperate and willing to try anything to improve matters. You know it's bad when one of the options you've considered was amputation. He even agreed to having a MUA.
MUA?
Yes, a manipulation under anaesthetic, where, under a general anaesthetic, they would try and manipulate the bones and break down the bone scarring tissue to enable the toes to move, was tried.
And how did that go?
Unfortunately, that just put him back on crutches for a month, until the pain subsided and he was able to bear weight on his heel again. He remembers his GP at the time was interested in his predicament, as most GPs had never seen this condition before, and asked if he could examine it. Unfortunately, even his lightest touch resulted in Tom having to knock his hand away, to the poor chap's surprise.
I imagine this is where the doctor realised the gravity of the situation.
And this was around the time he had an X-ray using an isotope injection that would compare the state of the blood flowing in his feet. And even to his untrained eye, there was a huge difference between the right and left foot. And I'm sure the isotope injection had no other effects. And the fact they finally fell pregnant a couple of days later was a pure coincidence, especially as the timing turned out to be perfect. This unexpected event possibly?
I'd say definitely.
Yes, sorry, this unexpected event definitely came at the right time and gave them both something positive. And this, along with his wife's support, were definitely the only good things that came from this time in his life.
I would have hated to have seen what would have happened to Tom without this glimpse of sunshine entering his life.
It certainly gave him a reason to push forward.
And don't forget, these videos are for his son and not about him. And so we won't need to explain his part in Tom's journey, apart from the fact he made it all worthwhile.
Absolutely worth mentioning, but we need to get back to Tom.
Off you pop then, babe.
Thanks, I think. Okay, finally it was decided that a specialist hospital was the way to go. So an appointment was made to see the specialist team at Stanmore Hospital, where he met his second professor and a whole team of pain specialists who finally explained the situation.
About time, so what did they say?
Apparently 1 in every 1,000 fractures develop unwanted side effects, and of those, another 1 in 1,000 develop what he had.
1 in a million are still better odds than Brian winning Powerball.
Yeah, but I know which one I'd prefer.
True.
Back in the 90s, it was known under the general condition of reflex sympathetic dystrophy, which gives nobody a clue what it's related to. Over time, it became known as CRPS, or complex regional pain syndrome. He had scans and tests and tried new drugs like gabapentin, and many variations of opioids were tried, and it was decided that an intensive bout of physio was a good place to start. He would spend 3 weeks in a specialist rehab ward with others who had long-term conditions with complicated side effects. In his first stay at Stanmore, he would have a guanethidine block on every Monday, Wednesday and Friday for 3 weeks.
So 9 in total?
Yes, and each procedure would start with him having a cuff.
Shirt cuff?
No, a cuff like the one you have for a blood pressure reading, but this one was larger and it would go on the leg, above the knee, and be used as a tourniquet to stem the blood flow and keep the chemical cocktail local to the affected area. In his case, the left foot.
Doesn't sound too bad.
Well, after having the cuff on for 10 minutes, it does start to be very uncomfortable but bearable. The first time it was released was an unusual experience, as he could feel the drug moving up his leg, through his body, and as it reached the head, he felt like a sudden onset of a bad cold where you suddenly talk as if your nose is blocked. And he went very lightheaded, as that first injection made his blood pressure drop significantly and resulted in him passing out.
Did it happen again?
No, the doctors decided a lower dose would help, and he was able to continue with the next 8 rounds of treatment.
So it became more bearable?
Apart from the last one, when a junior doctor was left in charge, as he went to another ward to treat another patient. Unfortunately, he was away for an hour and Tom was left with the cuff fully inflated.
And as anyone who's had a tourniquet on for an hour will know, it's not a pleasant experience, and if not rectified would result in permanent damage. He even offered to remove it himself, but eventually the doctor returned and Tom was relieved once again. Glad to get back home ASAP that day. But was it a success?
Well, sort of, as it did reduce the swelling, which later on enabled him to wear a normal shoe.
Well, an oversized pair of Doc Martens.
But there were some fantastic doctors, therapists, physios and nurses, and on the whole, this experience left him feeling positive. Even if the pain wasn't dramatically reduced. There are also the mental scars from this negative life-changing event, and they required the long-term intervention of a specialist counsellor. Tom had already met several local counsellors, but let's be kind and say their understanding of his situation was a little light, and often they would give him advice about something they had never even heard of, and often told to pull himself together. Okay, not in those words, but you knew that was the only level of understanding they had. But Stanmore was where he met his first beneficial counsellor, a specialist in long-term conditions, who was the one who prepared him for a very different life to the one he'd had. And she guided him to accept that his situation wasn't going away and how to live with it. We would also like to take this opportunity to thank the counsellor who guided him through recent difficulties, and without him, these videos wouldn't have happened.
So he's to blame?
I see what you did then, but no, we will hear more of the good he did at the end of this series of videos.
okay back to the script and Stanmore Hospital?
Certainly, after a short recovery period, Tom went back for more tests and physio on a weekly basis. And it was decided another 3-week period in the rehab unit, and this time it would include a nerve block injection by a lumbar puncture once a week. He remembers lying on his side facing the monitor where he watched a live X-ray feed of the procedure. And watched as a 30 centimetres needle was inserted approximately 10 centimetres below his right armpit. And watched as it was pushed in position and entered the spinal canal where you could see the injection and flow of a cocktail of drugs as they spread down the spine.
Ouch!
Well, it was not so much painful, more uncomfortable than anything. But again, the interaction with other patients who were having a similar experience and treatments was a strange comfort to him. Just knowing you weren't on your own, as this was a different response to the ones you would get from people who would literally tell you that they broke a bone and it was fine and didn't know why you're laying it on, and it's these times you find out who your real friends were. He also has regular trips back and forth to Stanmore and would go there to try treatments and offered to go on a range of medical trials, including a capsicum gel.
What, like in chilies?
That's it, and this one was easy to distinguish it from the placebo, as the capsicum certainly warmed the area up.
Spicy. And you had to remember to wash your hands thoroughly before you go to the loo.
Absolutely. Another was the use of a TENS machine.
Like the ones used by women in childbirth, or on comedy shows when they wanted to administer an electrical shock.
Yes, and it had a beneficial effect with a promising outcome.
Apart from the odd electric shocks if the electrodes became loose. It was like placing a 9-volt battery on your tongue, and once it's touching it's only a tingle, but getting it on the tongue is a shocker. This was probably the reason he decided to try another more permanent implant, but that's in the next video. What could possibly go wrong? And remind me again why he doesn't celebrate his birthdays.
Indeed, but we will leave it there for now and return next time.
Did you remember to advise our discerning viewer that as part of his occupational therapy, he also experimented with a few crafting hobbies and a few tricks like coin rolling and juggling,
Balls.
and clubs?
How did you get in this scene?
Oh, like you? I'm just buzzing around.
Who was that?
That's Miss T. Bates from the FP videos.
Any reason?
I think he had to do some padding out so we get to the sunset at the finish.
Okay, that's fair enough.
The Life of Tom Ploy is a foul attire production. Now, hold on to your hats as we do a bit of padding out with some AI music.
In the valley where the rivers flow, the sun sets low, casting golden glow. With an acoustic tune, I strum away, hear the saxophone play as the night turns gray. Oh, sing me a song of the stars above. With every note I feel the warmth of love. In this quiet place we find our way. With the sound of the strings we dance and sway. Let the wind carry our hopes tonight. Under the moon everything feels right. With you by my side the world fades away. In the music's embrace forever we'll stay. With you by my side, the world fades away in the music's embrace. Forever we'll stay. Mm-hmm.